The first thing I felt wasn't fear. It was the ground shifting. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, the kind of shift that tells you something's coming, that whatever peace you thought you had, it's about to be tested. 5 bikes, loud and angry, tore through the quiet park like wolves in a meadow. Engines, growling tires, kicking up gravel like it was a warning shot. And there I was, Elijah Turner, just sitting under a tree in my best suit, flipping through a paperback like it was any other Saturday evening spoiler. It wasn't. What would you do if that peace you worked so hard to build was suddenly surrounded by people who saw it as a threat? What if you had 5 seconds to decide whether to stay seated or stand up for something more than yourself? Think about that. And while you do tell me where you're watching this from, what time is it over there? Drop it in the comments. And if you believe there's a kind of strength that doesn't raise its voice but still gets heard, you're going to want to stay with me through this one, Fairfield, Connecticut. A breezy Saturday in early fall. Families filled the park, picnics, soccer games, toddlers chasing bubbles. The kind of day that made you believe in calm. I was dressed a little too sharply for the park. I admit, black suit, white shirt, shoes, so polished they reflected the sun. But I had my reasons. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there because I'd promised my mom I'd walk my little brother Jace home after practice. And I take promises seriously. Jace was 10 scrappy fast. Still learning how to tie his cleats the right way. I was 16. 2 belt levels away from a black belt in karate, and I liked my world quiet and control. So I found a spot under the biggest oak tree I could, and read while the game finished. I barely noticed the bikers at first. It wasn't the bikes that caught my attention. It was the silence that followed after they turned off the engines, the kind of silence that didn't belong in a place like this. I looked up from my book, and they were just standing there. 5 of them. Leather jackets, boots, no helmets, no smiles, just eyes scanning the park like predators. And then they looked at me. I looked back briefly, calmly, then returned to my book like it was nothing. But inside I was flipping pages for a different reason. I was calculating breathing, listening to the sound of gravel shifting as their boots started moving. They didn't split up. They didn't pretend it was anything casual. Rex Hawkins, the one in front, walked straight toward me like I had something he wanted. Behind him were Vince and Ray, the others just shadows, for now. I closed my book gently, set it beside me, and dog-eared the page I was on. "What are you doing here, kid?" Rex's voice was sharp, dry, almost bored. I didn't flinch. "Waiting for my brother," I said. He smirked. "This doesn't look like your kind of place." "It's a public park," I replied, meeting his stare with just enough calm to unsettle him. That smirk cracked. "Got a smart mouth, huh?" He took another step forward. The other 2 fanned out, Vince to my left, Ray to the right. It was a slow semicircle like I was prey. But I wasn't prey. I knew it. They didn't, not yet. From the soccer field whistles blew, parents clapped. My brother's game was ending. Jace would be headed my way soon, and that's what worried me most. Not that they were threatening me, but that they might notice him. "I don't want any trouble," I said, my tone still measured. "I'm just here for my brother." Rex leaned in, lips curled. "Who said anything about trouble?" That's when I heard the voice, high, young, firm, "Leave him alone." I turned Jace, standing about 10 feet away, sweaty from the game. Fists clenched. My heart kicked into overdrive. "Jace, back up," I called sharper now, but they heard him too, and Rex didn't like being challenged, not by me, not by a kid. "This your brother," Vince said, laughing as he pointed at Jace. "Maybe we should teach you both a lesson." I stood, slow, controlled. Every joint locked into place with the discipline I'd trained for. My feet planted. My breath leveled. My hands rested at my sides, calm but ready. "Don't touch him," I said. Rex barked out a laugh. "Look at this guy," he said. "He thinks he's a damn action hero." I didn't speak. Sometimes silence says more than anything. "You're not going to do a damn thing," Ray said, stepping closer. I shifted my stance just a little. A subtle rotation of my shoulder, a recentering of my weight, enough for a fighter to recognize. But to them, I still looked calm, and that made them nervous. That made everything unstable. That made it all seconds away from erupting. For a few seconds, everything stood still. Rex, Vince, and Ray froze not because they were afraid, but because they didn't expect resistance. Not from someone who looked like me, a teenage boy in a pressed suit standing barefoot against a pack of grown men. I wasn't raising my fists, wasn't yelling or posturing. I simply stood. That unsettled them more than they realized. Rex narrowed his eyes, trying to read me. Maybe he thought I was bluffing. Maybe he assumed I was just some honor roll kid trying to act tough. But I wasn't acting. I was calculating, grounding my weight through the soles of my shoes, ready to move the moment they crossed that invisible line. "You know," Rex said, stepping in close again, "you really ought to learn when to shut your mouth." His voice was lower now. He wasn't trying to provoke a crowd, he was trying to break my calm. "It's one thing to be a smartass," he added, "but bringing your baby brother into this? That's just stupid." Jace was still behind them, his small fists clenched tighter now, his face pale. I could see him over Ray's shoulder trying to be brave. He hadn't moved, but I knew him well enough to see the fear tightening around his jaw. He didn't understand why these men hated us without even knowing us, why we couldn't just be left alone under a tree in a public park. And honestly, neither did I. But understanding wasn't necessary. Only readiness was. Let me say this. Once I told Rex, my voice low and razor straight, "Turn around. Walk away. You don't want to do this." That set him off. "Oh, I don't," Rex scoffed, then turned to Vince and Ray like it was some inside joke. "You hear that Bruce Lee over here thinks we don't want this," Ray smirked. "Maybe he needs a reminder of who runs this park." Rex stepped forward again, now nose to nose with me. His breath smelled like cigarettes and old coffee. "You don't scare me, kid, I'm not trying to," I said. And then he shoved me. It wasn't hard, it wasn't some cinematic punch, just a shove. But that was enough to cross the line. I let the motion carry me back a single step, then rebounded. My right foot swept slightly behind me. My hips turned. My left hand shot up not to strike, but to intercept. Rex's arm came in again, aiming for my chest, but I deflected it at the wrist, redirected the energy, and used his own momentum against him. His balance shifted. I stepped in. One palm strike to his solar plexus. Precise, not excessive. He staggered, wheezed, and took 2 steps back, coughing. "What the?" he grunted, hand clutching his chest, but there wasn't time to watch him recover. Vince lunged. He came in with a wide, clumsy swing, the kind that looked fierce but left him open. I ducked under it, turned into him, and slammed a low kick into his lead knee, not enough to break it, but enough to send him collapsing with a cry. He dropped like a rag doll, arms flailing for balance, and crashed into the grass. Ray hesitated. Just a moment, just long enough for his eyes to flick to Rex, then to Vince on the ground, and in that hesitation I moved. Spinning, heel, kick right into Ray's ribs. I felt the impact through my foot, the sudden thud of contact, and his breath leaving him in a violent gust. He stumbled backward, fell to one knee, gasping. Rex was back on his feet now, enraged. He didn't move like a fighter. He moved like a brawler. Arms up, fists swinging, wild eyes blazing with fury. Not focus. I dodged the first punch by stepping inside his arc, then pivoted around him. He turned to follow, growling, but I stayed light. Calm. A breath in, a step out, a shift of weight. Then I struck not hard, not with anger, just another palm strike to the center of his chest, right where it would knock the wind out of him again. His body locked up like a glitching machine, and this time he dropped to a knee. The park was no longer quiet. People were watching now, parents, teens, kids, holding juice boxes. Someone had pulled out a phone and was recording. I heard the whisper of voices rippling through the air. "Did you see that? What's going on?" That kid, I took a step back, not in retreat, but in control. I kept my hands open. Low. No gloating. No words. Just stillness. Jace was running toward me now, his eyes wide with awe and confusion. "Elijah," he cried. I turned toward him just enough to signal that I was okay, but I kept one eye on Rex. The man stood up slowly, one hand still pressed to his chest, the other reaching toward his belt until he saw all the people watching phones. Eyewitnesses. His anger began to curdle into something colder, humiliation. "This ain't over, kid," Rex muttered, his voice ragged. "I didn't say it was," I replied. He looked around, spat on the ground, then motioned to the others. "Let's go." Ray limped to his feet. Vince was still cradling his knee, but with Rex's help he got up. They stumbled toward their bikes under the judgmental silence of dozens of eyes. As they started their engines, the roar returned angrier now, but the tone had changed. They weren't predators anymore, just men who lost control in front of too many witnesses. They roared away. The crowd didn't cheer. Not yet, not until they were gone. Then came the clapping. Soft at first, then louder. A few kids shouted. Some adults nodded my way. Cautious, unsure of what they'd just seen. One woman said, "Thank you," another whispered. "That was incredible." Jace stood beside me now, breathing hard, looking up like I was someone else entirely. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Are you okay?" I exhaled. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go home." But I knew we weren't walking home from just a soccer game anymore. Something had shifted. Not just in that park, in me, and something told me. Rex wasn't bluffing when he said it wasn't over. The sun was setting by the time we made it home, the sky streaked with violet and amber like brushstrokes across a calm canvas. But inside me, nothing felt calm. My body was steady. Breath measured, shoulders relaxed. But my mind was a river, not chaotic, not panicked, just constantly moving, replaying every step, every shift, every decision I'd made in that park like a silent reel. Each breath, each block, each strike. I didn't feel proud, I didn't feel heroic, I felt precise. Like I had done exactly what was needed, no more, no less. But I also felt watched. Not just by the phones, not just by Rex's lingering words, by something larger. Like a force had witnessed the moment I stepped over a line I never planned to cross. Our mom was already waiting on the porch. Monica Turner, tough, warm, sharp as a blade. Arms crossed one foot, tapping eyes scanning the street before we even rounded the corner. When she saw us, the relief on her face flickered before the worry returned full force. "You're late," she said, her voice calm but tight at the edges. Jace ran ahead and hugged her waist. I walked up slower. "We had a situation," I said. "A situation," she repeated, eyes narrowing. I nodded once. At the park. Some men tried to start something, her eyes locked onto mine. "What kind of—" "Something the kind I tried to walk away from," I said, but couldn't. Jace looked up at her, then at me, waiting for me to speak first. I glanced down at him and nodded. "It's okay," I told him softly. "You can go get cleaned up." He hesitated, but then disappeared inside. Monica's gaze never left mine. "Talk," she said. So I did, not in dramatic bursts, not in long-winded explanations. Just the facts, the bikers, the threats, the escalation. My response? Her face didn't change much, just tightened here and there. Her jaw clenched at the mention of Jace being threatened, her brow furrowed at the crowd watching. But it was when I repeated Rex's last words, "This ain't over, kid," that her eyes flared with something deeper. Not fear. Resolve. When I finished, she didn't speak for a long time. Then finally she said, "You did the right thing." A pause. But right things come with consequences. "I know, I said I'm proud of you," she added softer now, for protecting your brother, for staying calm. But promise me something, Elijah. I nodded. Don't ever seek conflict, even when you know you can win. Let that be the last door you ever walk through, never the first, I promise, I said. And I meant it. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't sure what came next. I'd seen something in Rex's eyes right before he walked away, not pain, not shame. Something colder. I'd embarrassed him. In front of a crowd, on camera, that wasn't something men like him forget. And somehow I knew he'd be back. Not for another fight, but for something more dangerous. Something messier. The question wasn't if it was when. The next morning, the video was online. It had over 10,000 views by the time I brushed my teeth. By lunchtime, it was trending locally. Someone had titled it, "Teen Drops 3 Bikers in Park Showdown." The comment section exploded with theories. Was I a martial arts prodigy? Was it staged? Was it racially motivated? Some called me a hero, some called it fake. A few said I got lucky. But what none of them saw, what none of them could understand was that it was never about showing off. It was never about a fight. It was about protecting my brother. Period. I kept my head down at school that day, but it didn't matter. People recognized me. They whispered. They stared. Some slapped me on the back. Some asked if I could teach them to fight. But the attention made me itch. I hadn't done it for praise. I hadn't wanted to be known. But now the spotlight had turned, and there was no way to step out of it. Jace came home quiet that afternoon. He didn't ask about the video. He didn't talk about school. He just came to my room, sat on my bed, and said, "Are they coming back?" I looked at him for a moment. "I don't know." I answered honestly. He nodded slowly. "If they do, will you protect me again?" I reached out, placed my hand on his shoulder. "Always," I said, "but next time, I might not be alone." He looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said carefully, "people are watching now. Not just the wrong ones, the right ones too." He didn't fully understand, but that was okay. He just needed to believe. I had a plan, and I did. By evening, the local news had picked up the story. "Teen karate expert defends brother from motorcycle gang." The headline made me cringe. There was no gang, just 3 angry men with too much ego and not enough wisdom. But the media didn't care about nuance. They wanted a story. They wanted a spectacle. That night, Monica sat us both down at the dinner table. She wasn't angry, just focused. "If someone comes by this house," she said, "you tell me. If someone threatens you, you speak up. This is not a movie, Elijah. This is real. You did what you had to do, but now we stay alert." I nodded. "I've already started checking cameras in the neighborhood, just in case." She blinked. "You're already planning." "I have to be," I said. "He won't try again the same way. That kind of man, he'll come around a corner." She stared at me for a moment, then quietly said, "You're growing too fast." I wanted to tell her I didn't ask to, that the world had decided that for me, but I stayed silent. Around midnight, I checked the front porch one more time. Everything was still. The wind had picked up slightly, rustling the hedges. The moon hung above the neighborhood like a silent witness. I stood there, breathing slowly, watching the shadows stretch long across the lawn. Then I saw it. It, at the end of the block, a motorcycle. Just parked, engine off. No rider in sight. I stepped back into the house and quietly locked the door. This wasn't over. Morning came, but the weight from last night hadn't lifted. That motorcycle, silent and still beneath the street lamp, was gone by the time I stepped outside, but its presence lingered like the echo of something unfinished. I checked the front yard, the sidewalk, even the trash cans at the corner. Nothing. No tire marks. No notes. Just that thick, invisible pressure that something was watching, waiting. I didn't tell Jace. Not yet. And I didn't tell my mom either. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I needed time to understand what was coming that day. At school, People stared more openly. Someone tried to record me eating lunch. I ignored them. The video had passed 100,000 views now. People were tagging me in reposts, messaging me for interviews. Strangers called me a street vigilante, a young Bruce Lee, and even a dangerous example. It wasn't a story anymore. It was a spotlight I couldn't escape, but the only thing I could think about was the motorcycle. So I did what I always do. I prepared. I mapped out every route from school to home, learned the security camera coverage of the neighborhood, and even programmed a silent alarm into our front door. My camera, so it was that evening, as Jace finished his homework in the living room, I walked the perimeter of our block for the third time. Nothing unusual, no bikes, no wrecks. But I still felt it, that low-level hum in my nerves, like the static before lightning. After dinner, while my mom was washing dishes and humming softly to some Luther Vandross tune, I finally told her about the motorcycle, about the fact that I hadn't seen anyone, but I was sure it had been him or one of them. She paused, dried her hands, then turned to face me, serious. "You think they're watching the house? I think they're waiting," I said. "To do what? Whatever makes them feel powerful again." She nodded slowly, then walked over to the cupboard, pulled out a small folder of documents, and handed it to me. Inside photos, notes. A list of emergency contacts I made. "This when you were 10, she said. "I was going to give it to you when you turned 18. But it looks like you didn't get that kind of timeline." That night, I couldn't sleep again. But this time, I didn't stay in bed. I sat in the living room, lights off, eyes on the front window. I wasn't scared, but I was ready. At exactly 1:17 a.m., headlights appeared at the far end of the street. Slow. A black truck, this time. It rolled down the block like it was looking for someone. It didn't stop at our house, but it slowed. And through the tinted glass I caught the faintest silhouette. Broad shoulders. Shaved head. Rex. He didn't stop, but he didn't have to. Message received. I noted the time, the make, the model, the partial plate. Then I waited. 2 nights passed without anything. I let the silence stretch, let the routine seem normal, but I made adjustments. Jace wasn't allowed to walk home alone, and my mom's car was parked in the garage instead of the curb. On the 3rd night it happened. I had just come home from tutoring a friend walking since it was only 2 blocks away, and as I reached our street, I saw the figures. 2 of them, one by the mailbox, one standing casually by our neighbor's fence like he belonged there, but he didn't. Neither of them did. I didn't break pace. I didn't run. I simply turned down the sidewalk like I hadn't seen them and walked to our side gate instead of the front porch. I entered through the backyard, locked the door behind me, pulled my phone. I checked the motion cam. Sure enough, both figures were captured in frame. Grainy, but visible. One of them was Vince. The other wasn't Ray. A new face, possibly younger. Maybe just trying to make a name for himself. That's when I made the call. Not to the police, but to someone who would understand exactly what this was. His name was Marcus Delgado, an old friend of my uncle's, retired detective, former military, still sharp, still connected, still owed my family a favor. Within an hour, he was sitting in our kitchen reviewing the footage while sipping my mom's strong coffee. "This isn't random," he said. "This is planned. Intimidation. They want to rattle you. Wait for you to slip." "So what do we do?" I asked. He looked at me carefully. "We record, we log, and if they touch anything at all, we press charges hard." He handed me a card, "But just in case it gets physical again, you call me first." "Not 911. "Why not?" "Because people like Rex know how to twist a story. You want someone who sees through the noise." I nodded. That weekend, I stayed close to home. Jace noticed, but he didn't ask. I think he understood now what it meant to be ready, not just with fists, but with focus. Sunday night was quiet. Too quiet until the sound shattered it. At exactly 2:03 a.m., the front window of our living room exploded. Glass everywhere, an engine revved and disappeared down the block. I was out the door in seconds. Barefoot, heart pounding. The truck was already gone, but lying on the porch halfway embedded in the brick was a brick wrapped in black tape. No note, just weight and impact. I called Marcus. 20 minutes later, he was there with 2 officers he trusted. They reviewed the footage. Plate match. Truck confirmed. We pressed charges, and this time it wasn't a scuffle in a park. It was criminal mischief, property damage, threats, and with the video, the witnesses, and the prior incident, it wasn't going to disappear quietly. That night, for the first time since the park, I felt something shift again. But not inside me, around me. Because when Jace came into my room holding his pillow, eyes wide and voice shaking, he asked the question I'd been waiting for since the beginning. Why do they hate us, Elijah? I swallowed hard, because they think fear is power, I said, and when they can't make us afraid, they get louder. So what do we do, he asked. I reached over and pulled him into a hug. We stay calm, we stay sharp, and we never ever let them take our peace. The shift had happened, but it wasn't the one Rex wanted. It wasn't fear. It was focus. And that more than any punch I'd ever thrown was what would carry us forward, because this wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a line in the sand, and I had already chosen my side. The courtroom smelled like old wood paperwork and dust, like decisions had been made here long before the people who walked in ever had a choice. The day had come faster than I expected. 1 month after the brick crashed through our window, after the police filed the charges, after Marcus pulled every string he had to make sure this didn't disappear under just boys being boys, I was sitting in the second row behind the prosecution desk wearing a suit that felt heavier than usual, not because of its fabric, but because of what it represented. Strength, silence, restraint. My mom sat beside me, hands folded tightly in her lap. Jace was at home, excused from school, but not here. This wasn't something I wanted him to witness. Not yet. Rex Hawkins entered through the side door with 2 other men, Vince limping still, and the younger one from that night now officially identified as Travis Moore. They didn't wear leather jackets or smug expressions today. They wore borrowed ties and stiff suits like they were pretending to be something they'd never been innocent, but their eyes especially. Rex's still burned with that same unrepentant fury. He scanned the courtroom until he saw me. Our eyes locked. I didn't flinch. That was the last piece of power I'd kept, and I wasn't about to hand it over. The judge entered. Papers shuffled. The clerk called out names. Charges were read. Vandalism, criminal mischief, intimidation with intent, and a separate count of assault from the original park incident now tied to the vandalism, due to clear motive. My testimony came quickly. I wasn't asked to dramatize, and I didn't. I explained the park, the protection of my brother, the escalation. I showed them the video. I played the security footage of the truck circling the block. The moment the brick shattered our window, I let the images speak for themselves. Monica was called too. She spoke softly but firmly, painting the picture of a mother who refused to raise her sons in fear. Marcus Delgado took the stand. Last, his testimony. Clear, factual, professional, laid the foundation that this wasn't about teenage bravado, it was targeted harassment, deliberate intimidation with real consequences. When the defense spoke, they tried everything. They called it a misunderstanding. They said Rex had felt threatened by me, that the park incident was overblown, that the truck had been borrowed by someone else, but the evidence crushed them like a slow, steady tide. The judge, an older black woman with silver-rimmed glasses and the stillness of a storm. Before rain, listened without interruption. When the final arguments ended, she looked over her glasses and said, "There's a difference between having power and needing control. What I see here is a young man who chose discipline when others chose intimidation." She paused, eyes narrowing slightly. "This court finds Rex Hawkins guilty on all charges. Vince Baldwin and Travis Moore are found guilty of accessory and vandalism. Sentencing will follow." The gavel hit like thunder. Just once, but the echo was a lifetime. Rex didn't speak as he was escorted out, but I watched his eyes. The fury wasn't gone, but it had changed. He didn't look at me like prey anymore. He looked at me like something he didn't understand, something that challenged him in a way his fists never could. I stood only when the officers had taken him out of the room. When I stepped outside, the air felt lighter, but not free. Monica wrapped an arm around my shoulder and said, "It's over," but I shook my head. "It's quieter," I said. "That's not the same." The days that followed were strange. The video resurfaced again, now paired with news clips. People reached out, teachers, reporters, even some martial arts schools. They wanted me to speak, to teach, to share, but I wasn't interested in being a symbol. I was still Elijah Turner, just a kid who stood up when it mattered. What did change, though, was Jace. He walked taller, slept deeper. He no longer checked over his shoulder in the morning when we walked to school. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, he asked, "Do you think he'll come back?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said. "And if he does, he'll come through the front door because now he knows we're not afraid." Jace leaned his head on my shoulder. "You think I'll be like you one day?" I smiled. "No," I said. "You'll be better." That Sunday, I returned to the park, same tree, same bench. This time, no suit, just jeans and a hoodie. I sat with the same book open to a new page. The wind moved gently through the leaves above me, and the sounds of kids playing and dogs barking filled the air like a soft reminder that peace was not the absence of trouble, but the refusal to let trouble steal your ground. I didn't look over my shoulder, I didn't scan the path, I just read. And for the first time in weeks, it wasn't preparation. It was peace. Behind me, a voice spoke. "Mind if I sit here?" I looked up to see a boy, maybe 15, holding a gym bag with a karate patch on it. He nodded toward the bench. "Sure," I said, scooting over. "You're him, right?" he asked. From the video, I nodded once. He hesitated. "How'd you know what to do? How did you not freak out?" I thought about it, then said, "You train for the fight, but more importantly, you train for the silence before it?" He nodded slowly, like he didn't fully get it, but he wanted to. Then he said, "Do you think you could show me sometime?" I looked out over the field. Jace was there, running drills with some other kids, laughing free. Then I turned back to the boy beside me. "Yeah," I said. "I think I could." Because maybe this wasn't just about me anymore. Maybe resolve wasn't just a defense. Maybe it was a legacy. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay still when the world wants you to react. Elijah didn't fight for fame. He stood up for what mattered with calm clarity and purpose. If this story left something with you, a lesson, a moment, a memory, share it in the comments. I want to know. When did you choose courage over chaos? And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this, subscribe. Because these aren't just stories, they're reminders of the strength we all carry.